what about us indeed? This just came in today, courtesy of Tyler Durden. 20 banks, some suffering repeated outages, 6 countries, 1 in lockdown, 5 continents, tens of millions of unhappy customers. There's never a good time for your bank's IT system to go down. I wonder why. But few can be worse than in the middle of a lockdown. It's difficult to leave your home, he said, and your local branch may not be open. In fact, most local branches may not be open soon. And as a result, you are more reliant than ever on the digital banking services, he said, which is exactly what they want. That's what they're playing here. In New Zealand, now in its 7th week of nationwide lockdown, one of the country's largest lenders, Kiwi Bank, went down on Tuesday, leaving many of its customers in the lurch. And it's one of a string of IT outages the bank has suffered over the past 3 weeks after a so-called DDoS attack on New Zealand's 3rd largest internet provider caused IT crashes at a number of lenders, including the Commonwealth Bank and ANZ or ANZ Bank. All so damn obvious, and yet the masses are oblivious to their games. Now, the House passed a bill that we just mentioned earlier on Tuesday that would both prevent a government shutdown and suspend a debt limit, and a step towards preventing possible economic calamity. And the Chamber approved the plan in a 220 to 211 vote. All Democrats voted for it and all Republicans opposed it. And as the bill heads to the Senate, Republicans are threatening now to block it, which could leave Democrats scrambling to find another way to avoid a federal funding lapse or even a first ever default on US debt. They've been in default over 100 years. And worries about a looming default and the economic damage it would cause contributed to a US stock market drubbing on Monday. And Congress had to pass the funding by September the 30th to prevent a shutdown, it said. So why September the 30th? Well, the reason being is, on March 31st and September 30th every year, the latter of which is the end of the year's fiscal policy, are 2 dates that certain debts of the government have to be settled or renegotiated. And a failure to do so leads to a so-called default. And potentially all the assets of the USA Inc. could be sold off to the debtors, which is the Black Sun Federal Reserve. Now, many places in America have already been sold off. Airports, bridges, roads, rail, and vast swathes of some states, and the prime example being the whole of California, which was given to the Chinese. The Chinese consortium of clowns, not the government, pretty much have control of the whole of the East Coast, including Canada and in particular British Columbia. But do you know who are the biggest asset in America since 1933? Or what is? The people. Your government of that time put all Americans up as collateral for the debt. Yet where is the outrage? And by doing that, they are supposed to pay for every single bill. They didn't tell you that, did they? Every utility bill, mortgage bill, gas bill, insurance bill, they are supposed to pay. Separately, the US will exhaust all of its options to keep paying its bills sometime in October, according to the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has told congressional leaders this week. Why? Because Yellen is part of the plan to take down America, and yet again, she is born in and born to. Now, the House-passed plan would keep the government running through to December the 3rd. What's the odds of a Christmas shutdown again? And it would also suspend the debt ceiling into December 2022. Now, the bill would put $28.6 billion towards natural disaster relief. What are they planning? And $6.3 billion towards resettlement of Afghan refugees. Really? How about you send the $6.3 billion resettlement fees bill directly to the military and the CIA, as both of them are responsible for the Afghan refugee crisis? Send the bill to them. It was they who led your children into a non-existent war based on fake evidence to justify that war and loot the American people and the country. It was not a war. It was a hostile takeover and resource stealing exercise done in our name. But it's not just going on in America. We're off to China now. 2 reports. Nationwide power curbs caused by many factors, including a steep jump in coal prices and surging demand, have led to side effects at Chinese factories of all kinds, with some cutting output or halting production entirely. And industry insiders predict the situation could worsen as the winter season draws near. Are they saying it will be a dark winter in China as well as America, like Biden stated before he went completely brain dead? And they said as production halts caused by power curbs challenge factory production, experts believe that Chinese authorities will launch new measures, including a crackdown on high coal prices to ensure a steady electricity supply. Or, remember Thursday's show? Will they launch a total crackdown on coal and shut it down? As we reported on Thursday in Boris Johnson & Johnson's UN climate speech. He said China will end coal by 2030, agenda or not. And people may ask, why are we focusing on China? Because they are the drivers of the economy is why. And if factories' output is much less, there will be less products made for China, never mind the substantial global market they now lead. Many of the technology-based products will slow to a crawl, and subsequently the prices to buy them will increase and will likely lead to bots fighting in shops over them, just like people this week were fighting over petrol in the UK. Because everything is connected now, and what happens in one place has a knock-on effect elsewhere, particularly in the Western world, which is far too reliant on cheap goods coming out of China via slavery. Now, the benefit that can be derived from this is that people may finally walk away or back off from the materialistic greed which pervades our society currently. And a textile factory based in East China, Jiangsu province, received a notice from local authorities about power cuts on September the 21st. And they said, we won't have power again until October the 7th or even later. Just cut the power. And the power reductions surely had an impact on us. Production has been halted, orders are suspended, and all our 500 workers are off on a month-long holiday, said the manager of the factory, surnamed Wu, speaking last Sunday to the Global Times. And he said, apart from reaching out to clients in China and overseas to reschedule fuel deliveries, there is very little else that can be done, he said. But Wu said there are over 100 companies in the Dafeng district, Yanxian City, Jiangsu province, facing similar predicaments. This will in turn impact the rest of the planet, he said, which is already suffering stock shortages for various goods and amidst record prices. Now, one likely reason, the report says, causing the electricity shortage is that China was the first to recover from the pandemic and export orders then flooded in, according to Li Boqiang, who is the director of the China Center for Energy Economics Research at Xiamen University. And as a result of the economic rebound, total electricity use in the first half of the year rose more than 16% year on year, setting a new high for many years. So how is having extra children going to help with that? It's just not, is it? Due to resilient market demand, commodity prices and raw materials for basic industries such as coal, steel and crude oil have risen worldwide. And this has caused electricity prices to surge, and now it is rather common for coal-fired power plants to lose money as they generate electricity, said Han Jieping, who's a chief analyst at energy industry website China5e.com. And he said some are even trying to not generate electricity in order to stop economic losses. Like I mentioned earlier, the squeeze is now on the coal industry. And I don't think personally that industry will prevail for too much longer, either in China or America. All courtesy of the fake climate change people. And industry insiders predict that the situation may worsen before it gets better, as the inventories of some power plants are inadequate while the winter season rapidly approaches. And as the electricity supply tightens in the winter in order to guarantee power supplies during the heating season, the National Energy Administration recently held a meeting to deploy coal and natural gas production and supply guarantees this winter and also next spring. Not if it's all shut down, it won't be. In Dongguan, the world-class manufacturing hub in South China's Guangdong province, power shortages have put companies such as Dongguan Yuhong wood industry in a tough situation, and the company's wood and steel processing factories face caps on electricity use. Caps on electricity use. Production there is banned from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and electricity should be reserved for sustaining daily life of the public, an employee named Zhang told the Global Times on Sunday. Work can only be done after 10 p.m, but it may not be safe to work so late at night, so total working hours have been cut. and our total capacity has been decreased by about 50%, he said. With supplies tight and loads at a record, local governments have urged some industries to reduce their consumption, and Guangdong issued an announcement on Saturday urging tertiary industry users such as government agencies, institutions, shopping malls, hotels, restaurants, and entertainment venues to conserve power, especially during peak hours. The announcement also urged people to set air conditioners at 26 centigrade or above, which is 78.8 Fahrenheit. But with high coal prices and shortages of electricity and coal, there is also a shortage of electricity in the northeast of China, and power rationing began in many places last Thursday, and the entire power grid in the region is in danger of collapse, and residential power is being limited, the Beijing News reported on Sunday. Now, despite the short-term pain, the article said, industry experts said that in the long run, the curbs will enable power producers and manufacturing units to participate in the nation's industrial transformation from high power to low power consumption amid China's carbon reduction bid. What an interesting and revealing last line that was. Because that was the plan all along. It is the classic problem, reaction and solution program again. It seems in China, President Xi has had enough of certain money programs and is about to change things. But for decades, life in China has evolved around its homegrown version of let-it-rip capitalism. And despite being technically a communist country, actually it's not communist, it's Zionist and the greedy shekel people. The government had put its faith in trickle-down economics, believing that allowing some people to become extremely rich would benefit all of society by dragging it out of the disastrous quagmire of Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution as quickly as possible. And to some extent it has worked, because a large middle class has now emerged and people in virtually all strata of society are now have better living standards as a result, all of which means the shekel people now have more people to harvest. That's how their system works. They fatten it up based on false money transactions, they get people to borrow against it, and they collect the interest on it. That's how the debt money program works. There is no payback of the loan. That's what people, or very few people, understand. There is no payback of the loan because it didn't exist to begin with. And what we are paying back is their loan. They have leveraged against your signature. Now, the Chinese wealth disparity, and from the stagnation of the 1970s, China has been thrust to the top of the pile and now challenging the United States for global economic dominance. They have already replaced it. But it left a chasm of income disparity, a bit like America then. It's all a program. And it is there to be seen in the children of those who were in the right place and at the right time back then, as parents who were able to take over the factories in the 1980s made exorbitant profits which have paid for their progeny to now drive flashy sports cars around gleaming cities and zooming past the construction workers who wonder how they will ever be able to afford just to buy a home. And the report says the get out of jail card for the party has always been the phrase "with Chinese characteristics." And the concept of socialism with Chinese characteristics allowed the government massive philosophical leeway to run a society which in many ways was not very socialist at all. And the General Secretary Xi Jinping appears to have decided that this is no longer acceptable. And the Chinese government under his leadership has started putting the communist back in the Communist Party, at least to some extent. And the new catchphrase is common prosperity. Sounds good to me, that. If you actually read all the political ideologies, if implemented correctly, which is the important part, the best ideology is communism, because it talks about sharing equal. Everyone gets a piece of the pie if it's done correctly. Not while there's Zionists around and shekel people, it won't. So his new catchphrase is common prosperity, where all people win. A bit like what we're trying to do with the TPC. And it hasn't really appeared yet on the street side propaganda posters, but this can't be far off, it said. It is now the cornerstone of what China's leader is doing. And under this banner, they're going to be targeting tax evasion by the wealthy. Makes more sense, as do the moves to make education more equitable by banning private tutoring companies. And the ongoing crackdown on the country's tech giants can also be seen as part of this plan. So does Xi Jinping really believe in this idea of a communist project? Well, it's hard to be 100% sure, but some observers would say it certainly seems to be that way. And as a comparison, in the past, it didn't feel like that with many other party officials. And the thing is that, along with the wealth redistribution aspects of the communist path, Mr. Xi also seems to believe that this means thrusting the party back into most aspects of daily life as the only realistic way of achieving what needs to be done. Chinese children are being lazy, they said, wasting away their youth playing video games. The party then came to the rescue and a 3-hour gaming limit was imposed. Teenagers having their minds poisoned with silly idol-worshipping television. Party to the rescue, sissy-looking boys banned from programs. Demographic time bomb ticking again. The party has the solution, a 3-child policy for all. Football, cinema, music, philosophy, babies, language, science, and the party has all the new answers. It will be interesting to see how that all plays out. Is China adapting a more people-based policy or setting it up for another archaic control-based strategy? I guess time will tell.